What's up, guys? Erik Temple, CEO and co-founder of Temple Athlete Advisory Group. I'm here with Grant Temple, who is our COO and also co-founder. We're on episode 10 of the Roadmap to College Soccer. We also have two awesome guests on today, Luke and Lewis. Welcome to the show. How you guys doing?
Good.
Thank you for inviting us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to having you guys on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so different layout here. Obviously, we've had some guests on before, Grant and I and one other person. So now we got 4 people on the podcast, which will make it interesting, make it fun. And yeah, we met you guys just a couple of days ago, right? And kind of have connected through Instagram and businesses, and we're going to get to all that. But yeah, why don't we start, Luke? Why don't you just kind of talk about where you are in your journey, right, going into your grad year at Wake Forest playing Division I soccer. So we'll start with you, kind of for the listeners, kind of lay out, kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I definitely did not take a conventional route. This actually, Wake Forest is my 4th school. So prior to college, I was born in the DC area, but then at the age of 12, I moved to London, England, primarily for my dad's work. But then kind of being that I was in Europe, I sort of started to really branch out and become serious at developing and making the most of the opportunities that England and then Spain provided me. So I spent 3 years playing in Liga Nacional and División de Honor in Spain, and so I got a great opportunity to develop through the Spanish academy system. And then my first school was the University of Virginia, so I went in 2022. Did not compete, was really more, of a training player. And for my first year of eligibility, I ended up entering the transfer portal, going to Rider University in New Jersey, which is a solid D1 in the MAC, and played three great years. Then just this past December, transferred to Hofstra for a semester, a spring semester, and then decided, and I'm sure we'll get more into the nitty gritty of these things, but then I decided to continue evaluating my options and went into the portal, and now I'm committed to Wake Forest. So I'll play my final fall season at Wake Forest.
That's awesome. What a journey, man. It definitely speaks to some of the hot topics we've talked about here on our podcast, between the roadmap to kind of how you got to where you were and also the transfer portal. So definitely appreciate you giving everybody kind of the insight on how you got to where you are today.
Of course.
Yeah. Lewis, how about you? How about you give our listeners a good breakdown of kind of how you got to where you are?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as well traveled as Luke, but I came through the Aston Villa Academy in England. I played there for 4 years, I believe. And then I transferred to a team in League One called MK Dons, where I signed professional contracts, played a few professional games for them. And then I came out of that and I felt a bit jaded with the English kind of football scene. So I decided, well, actually, funny story, I got a DM in my message request, and I never used to check my DMs. But this random day I checked it, and this agency was offering a chance to come to America. And it was always something that I was interested in, but I never had the opportunity to do. Obviously, because I was playing week in, week out. But it always used to come into Aston Villa and kind of sell it to us. And I was like, if I had the opportunity, I'd always want to do that. And then obviously the opportunity arose. So I went to Kentucky for my first year, really enjoyed it there, loved it there. And then I moved on to Gardner Webb for my sophomore year, and we had a really good season. It didn't really end the way we wanted it to. And then now I'm at Hofstra. I just joined in the spring, and I'm really enjoying it. And then I'm looking forward to the fall.
Awesome. Yeah. So you played for with Scotty Wells there for his final year at Gardner Webb, right?
I did. Great.
Is that
coach, great guy.
Yeah. Now he moved on to Liberty, I believe. You can see, right? I think something we touch on all the time is just the amount of movement, right? Scott takes the job up at Liberty, and I'm sure it changed maybe your thought process in that, why maybe you went into the portal without putting words in your mouth. But on both sides, there's cause and effects, right? So, definitely good insight there as well. And so for our listeners, we've touched on this a lot, and we talk about the importance of your journey in this college selection process and the transfer portal, and how much the D1 game is evolving, roster caps and these different things, right? So, definitely appreciate your guys' kind of insight. And so kind of talk about, both of you being at the time maybe foreign, right? Because Luke, you're living overseas, and Lewis is coming from England directly. And Lewis, you just kind of touched on a little bit, what drove you to, let's say, the first school of your choice, right? We can get to the portal maybe in the next segment, but Luke at UVA, Lewis, for you, like kind of what got you to Kentucky, and kind of how was that process as an 18, 19-year-old kid trying to select, where you wanted to go?
Well, I'll be honest, I only knew a couple colleges. I'm coming from England because of like basketball, March Madness, and obviously the American college football kind of scene. I've always been like a sports fanatic, especially an American sports fanatic. So when I had a couple big schools like Ohio State, West Virginia, and Kentucky, but when Kentucky messaged me in particular, I was like, wow, that's a massive basketball school. That's the most well-known school that I know, I'm aware of. I really want to go there. So I went on a visit there. I went on a visit to all the schools, but I went on a visit there, and I just remember having a really good connection with the place and also the people that were there. So that was really the choice I made, and it was really, at the time, it was a no-brainer.
Yeah, I think for myself, my plan A was to stay in Europe, and I think just the perception of soccer in the world is that, European soccer is deemed the best and has been. And I think, to be fair, the American game is 100% growing. And, I think back when I was kind of evaluating my options, I got to a stage where I was 18, 19 years old. And I realized like there's really no other place in the world that emulates what the college soccer system is doing, where you're able to pursue soccer at an extremely high level and grow as a player and get a lot of opportunities to, develop athletically, but then also, cover your downside, and you're able to get a really good degree. And so I don't think, and I know in England, and I'm sure Lewis is familiar with this, you have to make a decision right after you do your GCSEs at the age of 16. You have to make a decision. Are you going to go full in and put all of your eggs in one basket and go the soccer route? Or are you going to, take the quote unquote safer option and just really focus on your academics? So I think for me, I just wanted to prolong my ability to pursue soccer while also covering my tracks a little bit and making sure that, I have a good plan B if it doesn't all work out.
No, I think that's really interesting. And I think when you look at, and I say this in a positive way as well, the internationals that have come over and quote unquote from an American view maybe are like, oh, they're taking roster spots in American schools, right? I mean, that's a perception for sure. And what we always talk about is, okay, well, if you can get a 18, 19, 20-year-old international versus an 18-year-old American, you've kind of, as you just said, you've made your choice, like kind of the football over there is life. And, I think here it's almost, we talked about this in our previous episode, Grant, right? As we're talking about this full year calendar and the 5th year option that's coming out, it isn't necessarily always a lifestyle for Americans. Like an 18-year-old American is like, I go to college, and if I can play soccer, that's great. I think in Europe and in other countries, South American countries, it's like my way of life and survival almost is like playing the game of soccer, and then things come behind that. So it definitely, I think for our listeners and people that follow us, it'll be good for them to hear that perspective, like how you talk about at 16, it's like now a choice. And so Lewis, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was put in that exact situation. I got presented with a professional contract, and they were like, "Listen, this is a full-time job now. You're going to get paid. It may not be that much at 16, but you're still getting paid to do a job essentially." So that meant foregoing the opportunity to go to university, or even, I don't know if you guys are familiar with A levels, but even do A levels, which if you want to go in the job market in England, that's very important to have. So it was kind of a thing where this has to work out. I have to play and I have to do well and then get the next contracts and the next contracts. And I think the American option, as Luke said, it prolongs your ability to assess your options going forward into later life, and also an opportunity to play professionally in America, and which is growing. It's a great place to be. I remember I always said that I always wanted to drive a car, listen to country music, and just drive along the South and just like see all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that last year I got to do that, and it's such
You were
a
in
great
Kentucky.
opportunity that not many people that don't live in America really get to do. And I'm sure Americans don't really appreciate that you guys have such a unique country that provides so many opportunities for not just Americans, but worldwide as
Yeah,
well.
now you're up in New York City, which is the completely different lifestyle, right? Like,
Yeah.
now you're getting run over trying to get across the street.
Yeah.
But no, it's good. It's a good perspective from both of you, and it's just interesting to hear your guys' pathways, and I guess that can kind of jump us into maybe a little bit of the next phase of like we talk about the portal and the good, the bad, the ugly, right? The good is go back to when I was playing way too long ago. I always say I don't want to date myself. There was no portal, right? So if you like wanted to leave a school, you went to your AD and you were like, I want to transfer. And then it was kind of like on you. And then you had to sit a year. So if you transferred, it was like a year you had to sit. And now the portal is this like website you put yourself into that coaches have access to. And it's kind of like free reigns, right? No real wait period, kind of can just again, jump a little bit. So kind of talk about your mindset going into the portal and then also like your view on making a change and what that means, for your lifestyle, for your livelihood, for the academic piece. And Lewis, we can start with you just to kind of return volley here. So Luke's not always going first, but just kind of talk about like the mindset of being in the portal, the end game, the pros and the cons maybe that you've experienced kind of being in that space.
But I think starting off on a positive note, I think the portal is it's a really important vehicle and thing for the NCAA college soccer to have, because if it's not working out at a particular school, or even if you've done really well and you want to test yourself at a high level, it gives you an opportunity and a vehicle to basically, one, improve your life and your footballing ability, but two, also see other parts of the country or gain other experiences that you wouldn't necessarily get if you had to sit a year or it was harder to move. My experiences in the pool, I would say, I hope I'm not giving the game away for some coaches and their tactics, but I would say that every team that speaks to you says that they want you. But it's your job in the pool and you and your family's job to kind of assess, what do they want you for? Do they want you to be a 4-year starter, a 3-year starter? Do they want you to be a bench player? Do they want you to be a training player? And like, you have to really dig in and ask them the hard questions. It may be hard at first, but you have to ask the questions and really assess what it is that your role is going to be, and do they need you? Because it's always easier to go into a situation when you're needed and like you are the first choice option. And if you do that, then they're going to do a lot more for you. They're going to bend over backwards for you. They have a lot more patience with you, and you're actually in a position of power. When going into the portal, typically you haven't really got much power. You're just waiting for people to call you. But if you find a team that really needs you, you can decide, like, you can dictate the terms, essentially, is what I'm trying to say.
How did you go about finding that, right? Because this is you're talking about the transfer portal, but everything you just said directly relates to what would happen if a kid was 16, 17, 18 right now trying to find a school, right? So how did you actually identify the programs? And then tell me a little bit as well, as like you said, asking some of those hard questions and having the tough conversations. And I know you're not going to know verbatim, maybe like the exact questions you asked, but like, what are real examples? Like, how did you ask those questions? You know what I mean? What were the exact kind of words you used? Because this is something we're trying to teach our clients. It's like, how can you confidently sit in front of a coach, articulate yourself, and get what you want out of the situation? And you just described yourself doing it. So if you kind of go into a little more of the nuances, maybe.
Yeah, I think you have to be confident with it. Luckily, I have a very confident, assertive, and direct father who he likes to be the bad cop and I can be the good cop. We kind of work together with that. But it's just about, you have to, like, it's awkward. Where do you see me? If the coach turns around and say, listen, we think you're a rotation player, but you're not guaranteed to start every game, that may hurt your ego. But it's better to know that then, and then make a educated decision on whether you want to go there. Then go there and go under false pretenses, and then you end up not playing for a full, and then you've lost a year of eligibility just because you wanted to go to a big name program that had no intention of playing you. So you have to ask questions like that. I remember asking a certain team, like, where do you see me? What is the plan for me? And they didn't really give me a plan. And that kind of said to me that it was just like a scattergun approach. They just hit me up in the portal and they didn't really value me, and they were asking 3 other wingers the same kind of things and having the same calls with them, and it didn't really make me feel wanted or special, so I moved on.
That's crazy good insight. Appreciate that. Now, Luke, I guess from your end, we'd love to hear it as well.
100%. So one thing, we spoke about the portal. One thing I should say is soccer is an entirely subjective sport. So one coach might view a certain player as, beneficial to their particular system or their tactics, or just would, like, just genuinely for whatever reason like them more than another player. And it's a subjective sport. That soccer is not track and field. I think making decisions in a sport like track and field is easy. If one guy
Yeah,
runs
it's like
a
times.
10:02, yeah, if one guy runs a 10:02 and the other guy runs a, 9 something, then you know who the faster guy is and there's no dispute. I think, with soccer, the portal makes it so you can really get a great, you're mobile and you get a great opportunity to find your best fit, right? And you find where, you kind of strike that balance between, pushing yourself and getting to a level where you're obviously going to be challenged, but, you're not just going to, insert big name program and just going because the logo looks cool. And then, as Lewis said, you're just sitting on the bench. So I think the mobility factor of being, of having that tool of the transfer portal is really appealing. I think it's going to change with the new legislation coming into effect. So I think there's going to be a little bit more, I think you're only going to get one, my understanding is, for the 5 years that you're allocated. But yeah, these past few years, definitely the time. I mean, this is about to be my fourth school, so I definitely know the ins and outs of the portal very well.
Yeah, but I think like what's interesting, Luke, what you talked about there, and I don't know if you read like our mission statement because you kind of hit right on it, is like finding best fit. And that's really difficult in the recruiting process for the variables that you spoke of, right? Maybe you worked with an assistant coach that left, or maybe the portal changed the team by the time you got there, or an injury or a circumstance. But what we really focus on here at Temple Athlete Advisory Group is really striving to push. We're not involved with a ton of guys in the portal or really any at this point, but like get it right the first time. Like try to find your best fit. Don't get enamored with the logo because that can distract you from your actual best fit, right? Everybody wants to put Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio State, Wake Forest, Notre Dame. We get that. But like if you go there and they don't check any of your boxes and you don't play there, you don't ask the tough questions, Lewis, you end up in a position where you're in the portal, but not at the level of being in the portal and having success, but trying to be in the portal off of failure. And that's a much tougher place to be, right? Like you're not leveling up. You're throttling back to try to find your best fit instead of doing it maybe right the first time. I think your guys' portal version is different than maybe a large percentage that like are leaving a school because it didn't go well and now they're trying to regroup, if that makes sense. But getting both your insights on it is super awesome. So definitely appreciate your intake and input there.
Erik, let me chime in for a second because I do think, to add a little bit of context and piggyback on what you said, I mean, clearly both you are very, very talented players and probably have a different early on playing experience going to really good D1 schools. And the moves you're making, correct me if I'm wrong, they seem vertical, right? Like you're moving forward because you're having, success, or you want a different challenge. And I think what we're finding, a lot of the transfer portal players, it's because, to be quite frank, right, not every American kid is as talented with all the opportunities as maybe you guys are, but there's still a place in the college game for them. But the problem is they think, I want to go play at these schools. It's like, look, realistically, your talent level just like might not be there. So from the very beginning, they're going and looking at schools that probably aren't a good fit, and they just wanted the logo or whatever. So they're in the transfer portal because they're not having a good experience, and it's like they're in a tough spot. So it's just it's interesting to see it from your perspective, and then a perspective that we see a lot is kind of quite the opposite. I'm curious, like what's kind of your thoughts on that as I say that?
Yeah, I think the portal's probably changed over the years from its inception. I think the sheer amount of volume of players that are in it now, it means that teams have an abundance of options at each position to choose from. So I think for some players, you have to stand out somehow, right? So that was probably getting on it's the way you come across on the phone with coaches. I think that's a big one. I would say your play on the field is obviously going to be the main impact and the factor of where you go, whether you go to a top D1 or a D3 or a junior college. But there's marginal gains that you can get. I mean, in one of my poor experiences, my highlight reel, instead of putting a rap song on, I actually put a 90s, like a well-known 90s song on, because I know that most coaches grew up in the 90s and they love 90s music. So it kind of meant that they were more
Can
interested
I
in.
pause you a second?
Go
one
on.
of our points is like when it comes to a highlight tape, and we're not a highlight tape company, but kids ask like what turns you on or off about a highlight tape. It's like parents screaming, wind in the background, unstable camera, rap music, like something that like has curse words in it. Like you don't want to detract from the film, right? Like you want the highlight film, like your eyes not to be distracted by noise and these different things. So it's really funny how uniquely you decided to go that route to pull a coach in. And all we talk about here at Temple Athlete Advisory Group is how you separate yourself in the recruiting process. And like you might have had equal talent to those three wingers that you're talking about. And the coach might have just been like, I like his taste in music. Like his video caught my attention and it sounds stupid, but like that's how small the margins are for a college
Yeah.
coach to make a decision. Like people look at me like I'm crazy and I'm literally not kidding. Like, and this was not scripted, people. Anybody that's listening into this was
I
not
wanted to say that.
scripted. Like this is, we've talked, Lewis, this is the second time we've ever met and talked. And the other time we talked had nothing to do with this. Like it's unbelievable that you said that after like the many takes we've had on these topics. So genuinely appreciate that getting
It's
thrown in there.
it
Of
is
course.
funny. It is funny because, and I do kind of want to say something on that. I think when we say this, look, we have an advisory practice, we have something to sell, right? Like, ooh, but people think the opinions we have are like coming a little bit from that. And I get it, right? But at the same time, it's like, this is the same thing every coach we've had on has said. Now, two different D1 players are saying, it's like, at some point you just got to listen to it. Like you might not want to believe it, but there's more than playing on the field that's going to drive your recruiting process. And that's exactly what Lewis is talking about right now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, maybe go ahead, Luke. You got something?
Yeah, I just had one more thought that came to my mind as Lewis was talking about the portal, and I completely agree. It's just given the abundance of opportunities and also the roster caps. You have to stand out in any way. But I think from a player's perspective, I think that the portal. I've got a lot of friends in the portal. I've known a ton of guys where I've been in the portal at the same time as maybe three or four different teammates, and it always seems as though there are these waves in demand. So typically, I think there's the initial, I'll call it like the A wave, where, maybe the top 2% or 3% of the portal, every team is kind of going for the same guys. And so let's say, there are 15 or 20 schools that all give one guy an offer. Well, obviously, that one player can't go to 20 schools and fill 20 roster spots at different schools. He can only choose one out of the 15 or 20 that give him an opportunity. So what that means is, a team technically has their money tied into that offer. So they can't then say, until he has said no, which will come, maybe in a week or two, they can't then give out that money to another kid or offer that money to another kid. It's technically tied up in an offer. And so I see that there's kind of like, I'll call them waves of demand. So like there's kind of the A-list wave, which is the largest wave. And then there's maybe a period of consolidation for, a week, half a week until some decisions are made. And then once those players that we'll call the A-list make their decisions, then there's kind of a trickle down effect where that money now goes back to the team because obviously the offer didn't go through. So then they're able to go to the B list. And that's how it works. I mean, you sometimes you just have to take your ego out of it. I mean, I know for sure that, a team, I was speaking with Wisconsin just recently in the portal, and they said, listen, we've got a guy, we see both of you at a similar level, but they're in state. So we're going to give that, they cost less money than you cost. So we're going to give them the opportunity. If they say no, then we'll use that money on you. I get it. It's professional. I would do the same thing if I were a coach, and it's just, so there's kind of, so in that sense, I was the plan B for that team, and every team, when they're looking at the guys that are available, are going to have their plan A, their plan B, their plan C, and their plan D. And, I think that's where Lewis's point to where those questions really come in, because if a coach seems unsure about plans or seems like he doesn't have a lot of the specifics that you're looking for, you're most likely more one of those plan C or plan D guys. And that's fine. Every program's looking for a different thing. But I think
Yep.
that's, understanding that it works in waves, I think is something that I've only just recently come to find out. So I don't know if
Yeah, I mean, I
you would
think
agree with that.
I think we talk about it like trickle. It's trickle down,
Yeah.
right? And as a D3 head coach, it's like you're going to see the 1% D1s trickle down. And as they start to filter the rosters, it's going to change those mid-tier guys. And then they're going to be like, wait a second, I went from being a starter, but coach brought four portal guys in. They trickle down. Then the bottom D1 guys trickle down to D2 or D3. And then those guys. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm at the very end of the process when it comes to the transfer portal in all of that happens. And you're right. I mean, you have to ask the tough questions. And I think anybody in life can say, like, I'd rather know the answer and it be transparent than not know, right? So, like, tell me I'm option B or C and for reason X, Y, Z, then lie to me and lead me to belong that I was option one and then it doesn't happen, right? So, like, you can live with, like, wait, I understand there's a kid in state Wisconsin, that's their top choice, less money spent, because it's an in-state guy versus an out-of-state guy. Like, I think you can objectively look at that and be like, well, that makes sense. And I think it's important for coaches to be transparent in doing that. And I'm not saying that all are. And I think on the flip side, it's important for student athletes to be transparent and be like, hey, listen, I'm waiting to hear from Wisconsin too. Here's why. Right. And I think that if those two worlds come together perfectly, that's where you have good relationship between player and coach.
Yeah. And I spoke a little bit about the ego. I mean, a lot of times you're maybe a plan C or a plan D. It might not even be at all to do with your level. It might have to do with, there's a lot of little pieces and things that have to click for, an opportunity to work out. And a lot of it isn't even soccer related. It's, there's certain guys that are extremely talented, but they just don't have the GPA to get into one of these schools that they might want to play for. Or, a certain team might have, a quota of American players that they need to fill for their roster. I mean, there's a ton of different, reasons why something might fall through beyond just you not maybe being a good enough soccer player, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great insight.
I think there's very few guys as well. And believe me, if anyone's listening to this, it's like, unless you're in the top 1%, and if you were, you'd probably know it. It's like all of this stuff matters. There's very few players that are just so good that nothing else matters. The coach will do anything they need to just to get you on the field there, right? It's like there's always the playing margins are probably thin in most cases, and it's all these other things that you guys have been talking about that really separates it. And that's really the point we want to continue to keep driving home, is that, yeah, I mean, there's these alternative, whether you call it skills, knowledge, wits about you, street smarts, like whatever you want to use, it's how to play the game. And you guys are giving a great insight into that. So definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we'll shift gears here a little bit because I definitely want to really get to the core root of kind of how we connected. So while you guys are still, wrapping up, your playing careers, we connected the other day again, like kind of through some Instagram, and you guys are starting your own a little business there, right? And we're kind of in a startup as well. So we find ourselves in this unique space kind of together doing two different things. Let's talk to the listeners a little bit about what you guys are offering, Mentora, mentorships. Kind of give us a breakdown of like your guys' thought process as to like why you guys started that and the meaning behind it and what you guys are offering, to student athletes.
So, mentorship is, I think, a very broad, and to some listeners, it might be a vague term. And so I just want to, before we even talk about the business, to me, I think mentorship is, it is basically it's a role model that is in your life that is on the same path that you're on, but just 5 to 10 years ahead of you if you're to continue staying on that path. That's what a mentor is to me. So you're looking for some of the, some of the issues that you might be encountering. You're going to need somebody that's already walked the path to help you, right? And so what we wanted to do is basically bridge that gap between talent and the opportunity to actually, in the accessibility with these athletes that are usually out of reach. I mean, there's not a lot of 12 or 13-year-old kids that have a D1 or D2 athlete that's in their vicinity that they can speak to. And so our platform is a platform where we connect kids between the ages of, U12 all the way up until U18 with a mentor that is on the path that they aspire to walk in the future. So that's kind of the large, big picture idea. And so Lewis and I obviously both, given our backgrounds and our pedigrees, we decided it makes a lot of sense for us to work together. He um, also has a lot of value from more of a tech side, and so he's bringing a lot of that experience on board as well. So yeah, I mean it's been great. We have active customers, active mentees, and yeah, we're looking to kind of appeal to the same sort of demographic as you guys are. So I thought it was great to connect, and yeah.
How'd that conversation happen? Because from you guys have both been in the portal a bit, it seems like you cross paths at Hofstra. Is that where you cross paths? Because I think you said you were from England as well. So did it originate in England, or did you cross paths in Hofstra? And what did that connection, how did that happen? Because I don't think your timelines overlapped too long then either. You know what I mean? For you to be able to kind of take this on. So I'm curious to hear how the conversations went that made this come alive.
Yeah,
Luis,
I
you want to take
mean,
it? Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah, I'll take it. I
Yeah.
mean, ever since we only met each other in January, but ever since then we've got along really well. We share kind of some of the same values and the beliefs that we have both on and off the field. And we were just sitting at a coffee shop one day, and Luke was talking about his idea, and I was like, it's always been something that I wanted to do because I feel like I have a lot of value to give and insight to offer, and I feel like you shouldn't just climb ladders in life. You should build other ladders for people to climb up behind you and bring people up. And I think this is a good conduit and a way of doing that. So that's kind of how we kind of tag teamed and came up with the idea to do it. And I think it's something that benefits footballers and soccer players, but also society as a whole, because you don't have to be a soccer player to do it. You could play soccer, but you could also want to do something else with your life. And just because we play soccer doesn't mean we're just zoned in on that. We have insights and advice that can help people throughout their life as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
what does someone working with you look like? You know what I mean? As far as maybe give us, you've got a couple active clients, like obviously don't share their like name and information and things like that. But if you want to kind of break down a little bit of specific circumstance, so, if our audience has an interest in something like this for their child, they can get a little glimpse into like what is actually working with Lewis and Luke look like.
Yeah. So a lot of the growth as of now has happened organically. So it's all word of mouth. And I think that's actually been very beneficial because, I'm sure you guys can attest this too. A testimonial, especially, a word of mouth testimonial is like probably the best way to grow. And so all of the clients that we've had are just parents, that talk on the sideline and say, hey, my son has really benefited from this ongoing relationship that he's been building for the past couple of months with this D1 athlete. And, I've gotten just great feedback on, you know, just the conversations that I've had with a lot of these kids, because to us, a lot of these ideas that we talk about might not seem that complex, but, to a 12-year-old kid, they look up to a Division 1 athlete like a superhero, honestly. Like I remember when I was 12, I mean, an older boy, even just a varsity high school athlete, seemed unreachable. And so I think anything that you say, whether it's even just, do your homework, simple things that are not complex ideas, because they're coming from a Division 1 athlete, it's just not going to register the same with the child as if it were to come from mommy or daddy, and I think that's really been the major appeal from a lot of these parents and the feedback that I've been getting. I also think that the parents, I like to set up a separate relationship with the parents so that I get a real deep insight into what makes the kid tick, what some of his strengths are, what some of his weaknesses are, where the parents, what kind of the parents are looking for out of this relationship. And then based on what I'm hearing from the parents, what I'm hearing from the kid, I can obviously cater my message to adapt to whatever their goals are. So if a kid really wants to become a Division 1 athlete and is totally gung ho on that idea, and the parents are fully right there to support him, then I'm going to speak to him through that lens, and I'm going to prepare everything, and I'm going to get all the ducks in a row to make sure that he is doing the absolute best to set himself up for as much success as possible as he climbs the ranks of youth football and then, starts navigating the recruitment process. But if a kid says, listen, I'm really not interested in Division 1, I'm really more looking to grow my confidence, and, I'm on the bench right now of JV and I really want to try to make it onto the starting lineup, then I'll speak to him through that lens, and it's about growth, not just on the field, but off the field. It's a relationship that should hopefully span years, where I'm creating a system of accountability and making sure that the parents are totally on board with everything that I'm talking about. So, it's been obviously an early, it's early days in the startup, but it's been, we've had nothing but praise from everybody that we've worked with. So it's been really exciting so far.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it
Lewis,
took you guys 5 months to meet each other and do something. Grant and I are brothers, and it's taken us 35 years to like each other enough to do that. So you got a leg up on us.
yeah, Lewis, what's your perspective been like on it so far, and kind of your ideas behind it too? I'm sure they're very aligned with Luke's, but if there's anything you want to add to it.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like as technology grows and kids have access to technology at a younger and younger age, the mental and social aspects of life and also sports has kind of been neglected and atrophied. Um, and I think if I was when I was looking back when I was 16 and I was in a locker room with 30-year-olds, if I was more socially and mentally mature, I could have had better conversations with them. I could have learned more from them and grown as a player and as a person. And I'm sure, Erik, you can attest to this. Typically, coaches don't really have the bandwidth to do all the work that they do in season, session planning, and actually coaching, but also like mentally and socially training players. You don't really have the time in the day or the mental capacity to do it. And even if you can do both, you can't really do it without one aspect suffering. So I think we as mentors and other D1 players that we have as mentors kind of bridge that gap and give back to the kids and help them.
Yeah, and just to, there's a kind of a phrase, it should be a complement to coaching and to parenting. It's not a substitute. So, I'm taking all of those ideas and just putting it into a phrase. It's a complement. And I think a lot of the times coaches or even parents might feel territorial, that we're saying, hey, you as a parent, you're not doing a good enough job, or you as a coach, you're not doing a good enough job, so we need to step in. That's not the case at all. It's a complement rather than a substitute, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, two things, Lewis. I don't mean to throw you on the spot, but how old are you now?
I just turned 22.
22. Okay. So, like, I challenge the listeners that are following this, or anybody that wants to follow it, and ask yourself, and Luke, you as well. I'm not discrediting you, but Lewis was just speaking. So, like, ask yourself if your 16-year-old can carry a conversation at the level that Lewis just did, intellectually and professionally. And then ask yourself, when a coach can recruit your son or this person for the exact reasons you just said. We don't have the time to always, in addition to what we're doing on the field, worry about all the off the field. You're starting to see why the international players are taking those places, right? Because you've been in a professional soccer system since you were 13, 14 years old, had to make a decision at 16. You're sitting in a locker room with 30-year-old guys. You grow up really fast in that environment. And in our environment outside of high school soccer, which now kids aren't even doing because of the MLS Next Academies, they're only with peers that are of their same age. And so you see this change in like maturity and professionalism. And so I think that segment right there just speaks to the importance of what we're trying to do here, and what you guys are trying to do in your business is like make kids more recruitable, make them, try to instill professionalism and be able to have a conversation on their own. Because when they go to school, they have to be able to have a conversation with a coach face to face, similar to this, and be a grown ass man, and not like look over their shoulder and be like, when is mommy and daddy going to step in and talk about my playing time? That's not how it works. And the second piece to it, Luke, where I wanted to pull you in, kind of went to our next question as we start to kind of wind down the podcast here. You said compliment. And I think, like, I'll speak to my own program. I always like having guys that have just graduated the program involved, because I think it is a bridge to a gap between the players. It's like a conduit, someone that's recently graduated that connects, and then the coaching staff. And so, like, mentors are that, right? It's hard for me at 38 now. I hate to say that, but like to connect to an 18-year-old mind. Like, I don't know, that whole 6-7 thing came up like last year, and I'm like, what the hell are people talking about? But like then one of my assistants like, that's just like a catchy, and I'm like, oh, okay. That's how I know I'm like aging myself out a little bit. So I think just having mentors that they're just as important as a coach. And I guess the question really becomes, do you think that players and young men develop better with all three of those phases? I'm thinking the answer is yes, right? A parent, a coach, and a mentor that kind of hits it at every different level. I guess kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think mentorship is sort of an all-encompassing relationship whereby, a mentor can be a coach in a way. We can help, we can look at their film and say that they, need to do X, Y, and Z better on the field. But we can also sort of step into more of an emotionally supportive role as well. So I think mentorship is very versatile in how it works. And I think coaching might be just a little bit more confined. And so really that's why I use the word cater, because mentorship has a unique ability to kind of fill and we always say bridge the gap, but that gap is going to look very different for different players. I won't go into specifics, but I have one individual that I work with where, his home life is a little bit complicated and his parents are divorced. And so that presents various challenges that are going to be very different than some of the other kids that I work with. And therefore, a lot of the stuff that we talk about actually transcends soccer and we start to talk about a lot deeper issues because that's just what the gap for that particular individual looks like. With another kid, it's a lot more soccer focused. It's not as deep, as the other kid. And yeah, I mean it's a very versatile tool that I think is definitely going to be a huge factor in the years to come. And I think parents are just now realizing how valuable it is for their children.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to touch on as well is what you're really painting a picture of, right? Is how unique everyone's individual situation is. And I think in 2026, when everyone has unlimited access to information, right? Like you could chat GPT anything. So people have this maybe false sense of confidence that all the information's available to me and I can figure any of these things out, whether it's some of the things you just described, how to navigate those life circumstances. In our case, like college soccer recruiting, it's like the information's there, but everyone's situation is different and unique. And like one of our clients, is from Alaska. Mom still lives there. He lives in Atlanta with his coach playing soccer, traveling back and forth. And we have another one that's from Texas that lives with his family. It's like the way we have to support the two different clients is completely different. And they both could ask Google a question and get the same answer. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's not so much about the information. It's that someone can guide you through the nuances. And that's what you guys are doing for your clients. And that's also what we want to do for our clients. And I think that's, in a way, really where we kind of align is we work in the nuances and there's value to that because you can go get the information anywhere. Like you can go pull an email template from a college soccer recruiting thing, or you can Google how to navigate, divorce as a child, like all these things, but having someone there catering it to you and working in those nuances, I think is where the most value is extracted. I don't really have a question based on that, but just a thought after you guys were saying it.
Yeah. We'll kind of start to wrap up here. So I guess my kind of final question, and then we can do any final plugs, so to speak. If you can kind of go back and you're a mentor, or you put yourself in my shoes as a college coach, and you could give a piece of advice to like a 16-year-old kid going through the college recruiting process using like your lived experiences and the way you've walked through this process, like what would you tell, that person?
I would say that it is better to not have the opportunity but be prepared for it than get the opportunity and not be prepared, right? So I would say train as much as you can. Make sure you're fit because American coaches for some reason love guys that can run marathons, and then also just work on your social skills. I mean, being able to talk to people that are in positions of power like coaches or athletic directors or your professors is a skill that will transfer into later life as well. And also to seniors, because coming in as a freshman, whether you like it or not, you have to respect them and you have to speak to them a certain way. You speak to them differently than you would to a fellow freshman. So I think just encompassing all them skills and training them early before you get into a situation like that will put you in good stead, both on the field and off it.
Yeah, man. Well said.
It's gonna be hard to top that one. It's gonna be hard to top that one. Yeah, I mean, I think, we spoke before about how many variables go into being successful collegiate athlete. And I think making sure, especially the academic piece, I mean, you might overlook it and really think that, your abilities on the field are going to make or break your options, but there's a ton of top schools that just are not going to be able to get you in if you don't have, if you don't surpass a certain GPA threshold. There are a lot of different variables that I think you need to, make sure you consider as you navigate the process. And yeah, I mean, we talked, spoke about best fit. I think that's a great, it's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of my, my thoughts. Yeah, I don't have any. Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. I think even for, anybody that passes this podcast along to a 16 or 17-year-old listening, maybe they hear Grant and they hear another coach, and it just sounds, again, cliche or coach talk or whatever analogy you want to use. But hearing two guys that are D1 athletes currently kind of crossing paths and going in different directions in your journey, hopefully you'll give a different perspective to the listeners. So I guess my final question, World Cup starts in a couple weeks here. Who do you guys got? Who's going to win it?
Football's coming home for Lewis. I know it.
Well, Lewis is already celebrating Arsenal. Yeah, like you already got Arsenal winning the league and they're in the Champions League final. So, but who do you got, Lewis?
I'm not allowed to say anyone else other than England.
Okay.
60 years since we last did it, so I mean it's a big round number, and it'd be a great thing if we could do it again. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I am a British citizen as well, so I'm a dual British and American citizen. So I feel like it has to be England for me as well. Just out of allegiance.
All right.
Will
But
say
it's probably France.
Probably, yeah. Well, I was obviously we're going to be pulling for the USA here, but I will say in 18. Yeah, I was actually in the UK for the entire World Cup run and was in just randomly, not for that, but was able to be a part of the kind of just the culture as a whole. I think you guys made it to the semifinals that year, some big wins, some overtime goals. So one thing I will say, I definitely appreciate, obviously the culture around it there. So there's still a part of me being able to experience that. I want USA to win, but honestly, I'm England close second. So I'll be pulling.
I can live with that. I can live with that. Yeah, Grant and I are actually flying out to LA to see the final group stage game, US versus Turkey, with our other younger brother and our dad. So it's getting close. But yeah, now this is episode 10, Roadmap to College Soccer, Temple Athlete Advisory Group in collaboration with you guys, Mentora Mentorships. Luke, Lewis, appreciate you guys getting on. All the best. Have a great summer. And again, we appreciate you guys getting on the episode here today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.